We will now do a land acknowledgement before we proceed. We take a moment to acknowledge all indigenous and first people of the land and space in which we live and breathe. For our community at Highline College, we recognize that we are on occupied Duwamish, Coast Salish, Muckleshoot, and Puyallup lands. We thank all relations and tribes today as we hold space as a community. With each of us joining from different areas, we invite you to reflect and thank indigenous and first people of the land in which you are coming from. Thank you, and I will now pass the virtual mic to the amazing Edwina.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Tayao Manuia, good morning, Highline and community. Alo ingoa Edwina Silafanga Fui. My name is Edwina Fui. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Intercultural Center Leadership Advisor for the Center for Cultural and Inclusive Excellence, and also the chair for our Unity Week 2021. Welcome to the 24th annual Unity Through Diversity Week, Abolition as Healing, Liberating Our Community. Established in 1998, Unity Through Diversity Week, aka Unity Week, is an educational programming series that focuses on exploring and celebrating the rich intersections of identities within our global community through workshops, lectures, and performances. But let's take a moment to soak in this year's theme: abolition as healing, liberating our community. Abolition, to end or stop. Healing, to become healthy again. Liberation, to free or release. And community, to be in a group. When you read this theme, it can present itself as paradoxical. But when we reflect and think of how we exist in the world, there are many experiences of living in a world of systems that are complex and sometimes self-contradictory. We invite you to reflect, listen, and engage in this week of programs, and to connect with this theme. This is the second year that Unity Week has been virtual. We all have learned to adjust, to be in community, to care, to survive, and are finding moments to breathe. I'm super thankful that I've had an amazing committee to really process all this year has brought. And so we also want to acknowledge how you're showing up in this space. I wanted to just give a special shout out and a special thank you and gratitude to our 2021 Unity Through Diversity Week Planning Committee, AKA the Squad. Dr. Sean McFessel, Maya Leonard, Betty Vera, Dr. Nikki Filler, Dr. Daryl Bryce, Hera Brook, Malai Lupe Samifua, Gio Mark Panello, and Doris Martinez. Without you, this would not have been possible. In addition to our committee members, I also want to extend my gratitude to the Center for Leadership and Service, our Highline librarians, Uni Choi, and Bob Heyer for their support for our programs throughout this week. And now I would like to pass the mic over to Dr. Sean McFessel, who will introduce our opening keynote.
Thank you so much, Edwina, and thank you, fellow community Unity Through Diversity Week members. We are really honored this morning for our first and keynote speaker for the Unity Through Diversity Week to welcome Skye Williamson. On February 1st of this year, Skye received executive clemency in the state of New York after 25 years, 3 months, and 24 days in a New York State prison. In the time that he was incarcerated, Skye attended Cornell University and Bard College and earned an associate's degree and then a bachelor's degree in mathematics. The senior project was on artificial intelligence, and his current research interests focus on blockchain technologies. But especially of interest and importance for the reason he's coming as a speaker for our Unity Week this year, Skye has also worked for 15 years as an activist. He worked a lot with program development on the inside. He was working with GED tutoring for fellow incarcerated people. He developed and enacted empathy-based theater programs and conducted a large number of trauma and wellness workshops. He also co-founded the Transforming Lives mentorship writing organization. And I'm just going to read an excerpt from the Transforming Lives statement. Transforming Lives defines itself as a program that advocates for rehabilitative opportunities for incarcerated people in prison and calls for the elimination of punitive measures counterproductive to that of rehabilitation. Transforming Lives demands that New York State honors the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which it has signed. This legal contract states that, quote, persons deprived of their liberty shall be treated with humanity and with respect for the inherent dignity of the human person. The penitentiary system shall comprise treatment of prisoners, the essential aim of which shall be their reformation and social rehabilitation. Since his release, Skye has continued to work as a decarceration strategist through the Transforming Lives organization, and recently received a position and is currently employed as the program associate in the philanthropic arm of the organization of the business Galaxy Gives, a philanthropic organization that supports criminal justice reform and ending mass incarceration, as well as bolstering equity in our democratic electoral process. In Skye's work, as we'll hear about today, he focuses on building connections of compassion across the walls that divide us, and as a means both in making resources available and improving the lives of people on the inside and outside, and in seeking the social change that we all need so badly. So please, family, give me a big, join me in welcoming Skye Williamson with a big round of applause.
Thank you, Sean. I like to say, start by thanking Highline College Unity Week committee members and you, Sean, for valuing both my lived experience and my perspective. Highline College is not the first to hear my message since my release, but you are the first to prioritize it. I am both honored and drawn into deep reflection by your invite. On one hand, you're recognizing and elevating my individual voice, but more importantly, my testimony here today is as representative of the many lives that have been trapped behind prison walls. Those who still endure the unsustainable suffering, the invisibility and the hopelessness amidst this pandemic. Out here, the pandemic has made our world less safe for normative interaction. But behind prison walls, the pandemic has rendered an ongoing nightmare that is more horrifying, if you could fathom that. Locked in closed spaces, dormitories and cages, where it is impossible to ever be 6 feet apart from another person. Under these circumstances, most of us are forced to wear the same masks for days, surrounded by signs on walls and doors and in the corridors which we traverse. There are flyers even thrown on our cots inside ourselves when we return, reminding us to be responsible and safe. These are notices from the prison administration. But these signs, they mock us. All of the contempt-filled performance is what they are, the unrelented manifestation that our lives have been deemed valueless. Only due to the performance, only thing that we actually seem to be due is the performance of care, not the spirit of care, and definitely not the practice of care. Unfortunately, it's of no surprise to any of you that the lives of incarcerated people are disposable. I accept your invitation, Highline College, and you human beings, fellow human beings. This invitation I accept is primarily because I have the responsibility to those who I've left behind within prison walls, those for whom the prison system has designs of entrapping in the future. To show, this was yeah, I got an echo, I'm sorry, but it sort of threw me off. But my hope is to show that the lives lived behind prison walls are valuable. And the best I can do is by sharing just what my personal experience is. While I was incarcerated as well, now that I'm released, that, my life was a life that was thrown away in your name, in the name of American citizens, of bringing justice and law and order to you. My lived experience for 24 years, 3 months and 24 days, as Sean has told you, of being locked in a cage, a human being locked in a cage, has revealed that the system is plagued by disorder and violence. It can bring you law and order because it's plagued itself by disorder and violence. And that this system that I've become very acquainted with intimately against my own wishes and desire, I hope things could have been different, but that it depends and requires of us as both incarcerated people and free people, you too, it requires of us the reproduction of violence to bolster and to reify its perverse position as both the alpha purveyor of state-sanctioned violence and the adjudicator of justice on behalf of Americans. We are only subjects trapped within this untenable and unhealthy perversion of justice. We have neither power nor justice for human beings to be derived from this system's infatuation with the perpetuation and managing of people's lives through violence. The criminal justice system is incapable of healing and addressing the most basic needs of the millions of people whom it incarcerates, the majority of whom come into that system managing their own life trauma, only to have it compounded by the trauma imposed upon us as incarcerated people. Highline College has chosen this year's discussion, its focus for Unity Week to be about healing, specifically abolition as healing. Thank you for that. Thank you for putting the two together explicitly, looking at our shared efforts to demand the end to incarceration through the lens of healing is necessary for improving our movement now and for the future. Because make no mistake, changing a system of violence so deeply rooted, so well rehearsed and invested in its own perversion and acquisition of greater power is an intergenerational struggle. A protracted struggle that requires each of us to be better than the system that perpetuates. It requires of us to perpetuate goodness and compassion in the world. In fact, my message to you today is that the effectiveness and sustainability of the movement to end mass incarceration as the antithesis of the system we want to dismantle depends squarely upon our willingness and cultivated capacity to render inextricably intertwined a lived experience of healing, engagement, and collaboration and activism. I want to repeat that, please. That the success of our effort, the abolition effort, the mass incarceration, ending it, the decarceration, the prison reform, it depends on our willingness to cultivate the capacity to render inextricably intertwined the lived experience of healing, engagement, and collaboration and activism. In other words, we as activists in this community must evolve to a place and beyond where the process of healing is the gift and active experience inherent in the dismantling of our violent criminal justice system. Let me distill my message. Let me distill it one layer more. Let me make it just a bit more succinct. Abolition as a verb must itself embody process of and access to healing. We must accept that changing that system requires us to make the central healing of ourself. We have to make that central, each of us, for each other. We cannot fail to recognize and accept that this criminal justice system is, in fact, it reflects our society, it reflects us. Ending mass incarceration at its taproot is about each of us not learning something new, but merely rediscovering the power and the grace of a beautiful and immutable truth that we belong to each other, and therefore we are responsible for one another. The technology and the institutions we curate are not proxies. When faced with problems of care, we must turn to our fundamental compassion for human life. It is a truth that we should always be nurturing and seeking expression of in all aspects of our life. Demanding that the criminal justice system change is no exception. Today, I will share with you aspects of my own lived experience as an incarcerated person and how it has led me to discover the transformative power of human compassion. Compassionate activism and active action is what I like to refer to it. Today, I would like to talk to you about what it has been true for me and you, that in the words of Mother Teresa, we belong to each other. Today, I would like for us together to take up a posture poised to act on the elegant words of youth poet laureate Amanda Gorman. She said, "Victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made." In her hope that love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. Today, I want to reflect that incarcerated people, previously incarcerated people and their families, activists in activist communities, college students like all of you, champions of restorative justice, professionals from across the domains of mental health, education, human services, and others, that we can mobilize ourselves as agents of change. But we must be prepared to lead not just with our anger, frustrations, confusion, and fear, but with our hearts first. Our weapon? No weapon. Our power? The power of mobilized, compassionate action, capable of healing the long-standing suffering of fellow human beings who are moved to take action. Yes, most of us protesters in the street, people lobbying lawmakers, volunteers, volunteering their time and resources, standing on the front line of this movement, they're carrying their own traumas too. They need recognition and healing. Our aspirations to create a new system must be steeped in an activism that champions compassion as a central lived practice capable of promoting the wellness and the healing of the human beings' sufferings that inspires their activism. If not, we risk losing touch with the very goodness that we want so desperately to defend and see flourish in the world. This is abolition. Yet, the abolition movement is merely a container for our aspirations and for our demand for a more just and humane criminal justice system. I emphasize the description word containing, the word container. Like many things we create, it has limits. I want us to consider the features and the practices of a movement, whatever the container, and all the efforts to bring forth a more just and equitable criminal justice system. We want to examine that so that we can know what we're looking for when contemplating our individual involvement, your participation in existing groups that are already out there doing things, and your potential to be a creator of a new organization, of a new effort that contributes to this fight. I want for this talk to be a basis for us to know what we're looking for, and if the movement and if these efforts are actually getting us where we want to be. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Skye. That's so amazing. Would you tell us a little bit about how you became an activist and how your sort of vision of change evolved from your experience?
Yeah, so I'm gonna throw a curveball at you right now, and I'm going to I want to hear this song. I want to share with the audience this song because it's a song from a group called Leaders of a Lost World, and it's called Let Me Out. And there's something about the energy in this song. So if we could just play it for a moment, and then I'll jump back in and what it means to me and how it expresses how I became to be activism inside, an activist.
Mental prison bars block out minds, you true soul teller lies. I never more than I won't play your games for vain. Are we just rats in a Bible suit, scraping for cheese in a maze made to lose? No, I'm not, and I won't eat your food. So do I don't care if you're right or if I'm always wrong. Just wanna sing my song before this whole world goes. Let me out, I'm singing. Let me out, I'm singing. I'm a liar in a cheating prison, accused of telling the truth. Let me out, I'm singing. Let me out.
Yeah, so yeah, let me out, I'm singing. I'm a liar and a thief in prison, accused of telling the truth. I don't care if you're right and I'm always wrong. I just want to sing this song until the whole world's gone. And so the song is really intense. You can tap into the frustration and the anger and that rage and the sadness and the grief. And it's just all there, the trauma you came into prison with and that which it compounds while you're there, because no one's asking you what help and support you need. No one has a blueprint or a plan. They just got a cage waiting for you after the things that you've been through have been real difficult to manage. Many of us, maybe you don't understand and know that many of us go to prison as young adults before we're fully developed, when other people are responsible for our care. And we figure out in the prison, in the cage, that we got to take over that our responsibility for ourselves and making it work. And whatever change we're going to make, we're not only going to make it under those conditions, we're going to make it in spite of those conditions. And I know a lot of men, and since I've been out, I've met a lot of women who've done time, and we're doing that, we're doing it pretty well, but it's hard to see that under the surface. You know, there's a lot of us who've given talks since we've been released, and I watch some of my peers talk to you and other members of the community, and what I don't see is the trauma. What I don't see is the pain, is the hurt. In some ways, we've made this conversation, we've made our discussions with you in the public, how somehow an academic experience so foreign from our own real lived experience that it's scary. It's scary that after what we've been through, we now then come to the world and have to assume a different sort of posture that's not authentically allowing us to express ourselves, in part because it's hard to say that you're traumatized. It's hard to say that you have things to work on. Everybody wants to be so normal, but it's hard to just to do that after an experience like prison. And so, you know, being in prison, one of the first things you discover is that, hey, I don't belong here, and I don't want to be here, and I don't want to be a part of this culture, and that I've ruined my life, and now I need to do things that put me in a better position to be resourced when I am given that opportunity. And the system doesn't provide you with rehabilitation programs that are in the moment and dynamic. Most of the material is obsolete, and the resources are time restrained, and access to the community and access to people are severely restrained, because the prison's priority is security and management of, you know, our lives through the lens of violence. It's not about compassion. It's not about restorative justice. It's not about healing. So all the things that you actually need are like tabled, and then you get this other version of something. And so what we have to do is like figure out what's the confluence of our needs, what's happening and what's missing, and how do we put our minds to creating a structure that can embody what's missing, connect with leaders in the community, people in the society who actually care and who are willing to come behind prison walls, or not scared, or haven't bought into the fact that our lives aren't valuable. Then we have to sit down with the prison administration too, right? Because there's some things, you know, they have to sign on to anything that's going to happen behind prison walls. And what they do is they bring their hatchet, you know, with them, and they cut off a lot of the things that actually matter and give you some version of what would actually make a difference in your life. And you just have to figure out how to make it work with what they allow you to have. And so this inspires in you like a certain, you know, again, it compounds that resentment, that desire for more, for greater. But, you know, that was like the beginnings of what has been my sense of just figuring out that I'm going to fill the gap, I'm going to fill the void. And if you could just, there's just this other song. And I just want to say, there's this other song that I want you to hear. It's called Wait by a group named Earshot. And while they're queuing that up, I want you to just know that music was really fundamental to the survival of us inside. It's what we had. It's a thing that's had a conversation with us. It's a dialectic with yourself when you're listening to songs that are speaking to you and just inspiring you to make them take the next step.
Something's wrong, trying to conquer these fears I thought were gone. And it's been so long,
Yeah. Yeah. So please cut that off. Thanks. I'm about to lose my mind here. Like, woo, that is an anthem when you're curled up in the night in the cell block, invisible to the world, invisible to your peers, invisible to the guards, and inaccessible to care. You can't give up. You have to find some narrative. You have to find some anthem that just says, get up, figure it out, move on. Yeah, and that's my song. That was one of my songs. And like, it's interesting. It makes me feel like my experience, what is the vision? What is the mission that I come out here with? And it has to do with, makes me think of the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall was like the separation between two communities that were the same community, that people that were the same people. And like the prison wall is exactly that, between citizens and incarcerated citizens. Like the system has put that wall as a way of dehumanizing and alienating the people within, but also as separating and making and rendering ignorant about the lives of the people inside, those people outside. And what we need is like to tear down that correctional wall, that Berlin Wall, but beyond just the physical. You know, abolition is asking to see the world beyond the need for prison. But while we're waiting for that to happen, we can't wait for the bridging of the people, right? And so what I have is a mission, what I have is an idea to bring out to you, to students, to professionals, to people who care about mass incarceration, is to find your way inside. Make those allegiances and alliances with people on the inside and do the work that the prison does not want to be done. But because that's the work of healing, that's the work of compassion, that's the work of care about the fundamental caring about human life. The system doesn't want that. That wall is a part of a design to cut that off. Just like the use of solitary confinement is a way of breaking spirits inside, right? But there's something about us as human beings that make us, we're just really resilient. If not, we wouldn't be here. If not, we wouldn't be enduring this next challenge to our existence, to our basic humanity. And so, you know, when you have to, you tuck in, you figure out what you have inside, and you play the hand you're dealt. And so that song, Wait, I'm not gonna wait. You can't wait for someone to love you, to see you, to ask you what you need. You just have to figure out how to make for yourself. And so, yeah, that's that, Sean. Thanks.
So Skye, could you talk about since your release, what have you been working on, and what are you looking to work on now?
Yeah, so quickly, when I was released, I was fortunate, well, prior to release, I was fortunate to have those connections between the community. Like I had people like really not accepting that wall was a thing that actually held them back. And I had the ability to have rapport. I put a fellowship from where I were with people from the community, helped me set up mentorship programs. You delineated those things from the beginning, Sean. It was amazing that I was able to do these things within the prison. And that's not evidence that the prison is an okay place where you actually can grow. It's actually evidence, only evidence, that when people from the outside care about what's going on with the lives of people inside, we actually can get some work done in spite of the prison, right? And so while I was inside, we set up an organization, a friend of mine, Cynthia Kling, called Transforming Lives. And we sought grants, and I wasn't able to get them because I still was an incarcerated person. But upon news of my release, the Elias Foundation reached out to me with an activist grant to support my development as well as my reentry, because they understood that was going to be a challenge. I've also continued my work with Transforming Lives, and I'm happy to announce that we're partnering with One Spirit. It's an organization of interfaith ministers who found out that we're doing this work, and they want to get involved. And so they have a separate committee called One Spirit in Action, right? And we're scaling up our mentorship model for offering things to incarcerated people that I wish that I had access to when I were inside. And so we're bringing community, we're bringing programs, we're bringing resources to incarcerated people, and we're putting the institution in a position where they have to say no to us, right? There's been not enough of that. There hasn't been enough of forcing the prison to say no to you about something very basic and fundamental when it comes to acknowledging the lives of people inside. I've also, as you mentioned, I've gotten a job with Galaxy Gives, and I'm a program associate there. And we give, we support individual activists and organizations that are doing work of decarceration, mass incarceration, ending that, and abolition. We also, more importantly, to me, as a person with lived experience in this position, we're actively under the leadership of Mike Novogratz, who is the founder of Galaxy Digital, and he's put money aside into Galaxy Gives and created this entity where people like myself with lived experience come in, and not only are we part of this, we are leadership in it, and we're deciding what people actually get money. And we were able to, with our experience and our vision, to see people who are budding leaders in the community doing the things that we need to be done in our community, that they may not have access to other foundations and resources because they don't have the professional structure of organization, or they don't have the experience of being in the field doing this work for a while. We give money to them, because we take the risk in the way that people took the risk with me, in the way that it's necessary to take risks when we're talking about changing a system that's well-resourced, well-rehearsed, and well-invested in its violence, in its way of managing lives and reducing lives. So I'm super about doing that work. I'm excited. I'm also been recently invited to be a member of the Sing Sing Prison Museum, which is Sing Sing Prison in New York State, one of the first prisons in the nation. It's known, its history, and we're going to be doing some really excellent and decent work, bringing out the lived experience of incarcerated people through that project, as well as other things. Like, mass incarceration is a problem. It's the civil rights of our time. It's the offspring of slavery, if I can, right? Because what was necessary for the slave system to exist was the dehumanization of the slave, right? Only then, when society was convinced that the slave had less of a value in his life, could he or she or their children be sold, right? Could they be summarily killed and lynched around the nation? That's the same cornerstone of our existing criminal justice system. It's predicated on dehumanizing us. Why then, if not, then why, in the midst of a pandemic, in a place where you're locked in and you can't separate 6 feet from one another, and you're giving masks that are, you're not replaced day in and day out when they need to be replaced, and you're as vulnerable as any other demographic who's on the front line of getting vaccinations, but there's never a conversation about bringing vaccinations to you trapped in population of human beings, because we actually don't value your life. So yeah, what I'm doing now is making sure, with a family of people, with a swell of human beings who are stepping up to say, we're no longer going to accept this very fundamental basic dehumanization. We've done away with slavery, and there's still work to do in terms of the remnants and the impacts and the way that the institutional racism has kept that alive. But we're also not going to put up with that with the system. And so I'm excited to be home, have people care about what it is that I have to say, and opportunities to get in and do that work. I have a quote from Valerie Carr. She's a brilliant person. She's been talking about championing love and compassion as part of struggle. And it's really important for me. And I just like, if I could share that with this community. Right, so this quote here, let me get it so I can see it better, sorry. It says, wonder is where love begins. When we choose to wonder about people we don't know, when we imagine their lives and listen for their stories, we begin to expand the circle of who we see as part of us. Thank you. That who we see as part of us is really important, right? Is that incarcerated people are a part of your community. I'm out here now, incarcerated people are a part of my community, damn it, that's for sure. Right? I just lived that experience, and I know there's a lot of people back there who's left there, women, children in the juvenile system, people who haven't even came into contact just yet, but the system is designed to pull them in and claim the best years of their lives, like it's claimed mine and many others. And some have just died in that cage that I gave description of, and I won't forget for the rest of my life what it means to be there. Yeah, I just like, it's important that part of this message today to you, to this celebration of Unity Week and abolition and understanding it in context of healing, is that what we need most as people caring about what's going on the inside, as part of this movement, as a legitimate part of this movement, just insinuating themselves inside. That is so transformative. And it gets at the root of what keeps this system thriving, because that gets at dehumanization. Thanks, Sean.
So this will be the last week. Have about 8 minutes left before we have to transition to a break and then Q&A. But I just wanted to ask, you're coming out at a really remarkable time. We're about Next month, we'll be looking at the 1-year anniversary of the beginning of the George Floyd uprising. And there's conversations about prison abolition, about abolishing, getting rid of the criminal justice system as we know it, and trying to, reform our society on a new basis. And a lot of things that have been unspeakable in public for many years are suddenly on the table. Mariam Kaba's book, We Do This Till We Free Us, for example, is like on bestseller lists. It came out just last month. And I think even, a year ago, this would have been unthinkable that these conversations would be so central. So coming out at this moment when there's maybe in some sense more space and more conversations about prison abolition and reforming how we approach all these issues, what's your impression of that movement? And how's your experience given you something you'd want to share with that movement?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So I think the movement is doing many right things. It's allowing, it's an open space for people who want to see the system change, who don't agree with what's happening with the criminal justice system, the use of confinement and the violence inherent in that confinement as a way of managing the problems. Many of these problems are about mental health, they're about poverty, they're about long-standing lacks of education and access of opportunity to communities of color, right? Like there's a history for this, and our society's response to that history hasn't been reparations, it hasn't been making amends. The response to that history has been incarceration. This is why we're 5% of the world's population, but we incarcerate 25%, a quarter of the world's incarcerated people. Many other nations just don't have money to invest to have a population of incarcerated people. But we not only have a system where we're incarcerating people for inordinate amounts of time in millions, but we've actually found it in our way of thinking about justice that we should invest money to do that, to keep this burgeoning population of incarcerated people, and then turn that into a way of life for some other people in different communities. These prisons are located in communities that are far and disparate from the places where people have been taken out of and that the communities are suffering. And in this way, they've been made as just devices and tools for careers for other people in other communities as an economic boom. Once again, this is the undercurrents of a slave system, right? So, our movement right now is allowing us to be confronting that system and saying, we don't want that to work this way anymore. But I want to, and a lot of that work, this lobbying to legislators to get legislation passed, protesting, to have our voices heard, different ways that the system, this movement has like spawned out tentacles is just amazing to see. But there's this other layer, Sean, that I just want to talk about with the time that I have left. And it goes back to the larger theme about compassion is that my lived experience as a person locked in a cage has made me really aware of the prevailing methods embraced by activists to end incarceration, that they depend on the very thing that the criminal justice system itself needs to empower it and make it legitimate. The violence inherent in fighting. These songs that I let you listen to for a moment, they were indicative of my will to fight, of my will to stand up for myself. But fighting is not a strategy. It is a transformation of oneself into a vehicle, an instrument, a version of one's life that is crafted to engage in a particular activity. A process of shedding everything that makes you vulnerable, the sacrificing of one's body and the narrowing of one's mind. For the fighters, the existence is reduced to survival and winning most of the time at all costs. For 25 years and 3 months, I've fought for my life. I have only now been able to begin the process of healing from both the trauma of being locked in a cage and the trauma of self-inflicted wounds perpetuated by my disassociated self. What I'm warning you about is that the consumption, being consumed and preoccupied by sustaining a strategic and adaptive fight against the omnipotent system, that for sure can take you off the path of self-love, self-care, caring about other people, right? I've witnessed enough in the media, I've witnessed enough in conversations, and I even had my own experience in the short time that I've been home. That if you use the wrong language in this movement that's about reform and rehabilitation and abolition, that you will be reproached by someone who's on your same team for the use of language. Like I want to push back on the use of language being more important than the nature of one's relationship, the nature of this movement being a thing that is actually helping us achieve and heal from the thing and protect that which we want most. And that's healing, right? This movement should embody, as I said earlier, a capacity, a process, an everyday engagement, an experience that puts people in it on the path to getting access to what they otherwise don't have access to. And that's personal healing from individual trauma and then other opportunities that can come out of it. My lived experience as a person incarcerated in the belly of the beast, restrained and manacled and shackled, is that all I needed was a few people who cared, a few people who were willing to listen to my ideas and help me bring them to fruition, and not be deterred from doing that and shamed from doing that by the institution. And that translated as a very powerful thing. And that allowed for a certain degree of wellness to come back to me that was more of a sustaining thing than just my will to fight. My mom had to tell me one day in our conversation, she says, every time we talk, you're talking about how you injured yourself again. So you've been fighting so long that you've started to beat yourself up now. You can't beat that system. Now you're beating yourself up. You got to relax. You got to make time and space to heal, to take care of yourself. And that's what I want for this movement too. As I'm out here, I'm witnessing that there's not always time and space made by people who want to stand up for this very righteous, this very long overdue agenda of changing the criminal justice system. But you can't lose touch while we do that with what it takes and what it means and how to practice and how to refine and how to build and how to cultivate a human community of people who actually care. Because if you do, then what you're going to create is something that we also want to get rid of soon thereafter. That's what I have, Sean, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Skye. Did you want to describe the last song that we're gonna play as we lead into a 10-minute break? And then for those of you in the audience who can, we'll please bring your questions. We'll be having a half an hour Q&A period starting sharply at 11 o'clock.
Yeah,
for sure. This last song?
Yeah. So this last song is Black Violin. It's definitely much more sedate, but it's still equally inspirational. There's no real edge to it. What's in there is a lot of spirit and a lot of heart. And it's the human community moving together in a way that is making sure that they take care of one another, work on each other's trauma and healing, as well as look to the future and make demands on the system that definitely needs changing. And so it's called Black Violin, One Step. Thank you all.
Standing on a landmine and we're singing hallelujah. Thrown into the end times and we're singing hallelujah. Gonna take my for the future, baby. Take my for the future. One step to the future. Been down but I've been strong. Don't right when you turn wrong. Thought I lost but I still won. One step to the future, step to the future. Been down but I've been strong. This time it's a new song. Thought I lost but I still won. One step to the future, step to the future. Future. Been down but I've been strong. Never knew take this long. But this time it's a new song, new song. gonna sing one for the future, yeah. I stood up when you stood your ground. I got up when you knocked me down. I keep on walking, one step to the future, step to the future, yeah. Can't hold me like it used to, control me like it used to, 'cause I'm not what you used to. No, this ain't what you used to.
Peyton Cohen asks, I find your stories and perspective very inspiring. What are some steps you'd like to see the criminal justice system take to improve the issues surrounding mass incarceration? And I know you and I have spoken some about the sort of roots and the fruits and the priorities that the movement, like how people might want to think of the priorities strategically. So
Right.
what do you think about?
So I first want to say in response to that question that it's really important that, you know, the person asking that question, you know, that you know, I don't want to like put a burden on you necessarily in terms of like figuring it out on your own or anything like that. But I mean, like your questions are equally important in terms of the vision, in terms of putting on the table something that the institution needs to respond to. So like, I guess you're representative of what I want most for this institution to embrace, which is the voices of people in the public, because through the voices of the people in the public, I'm sure that, you know, people in the public aren't just going to come into the prison and be like, here, do this for them, and leave incarcerated people without a voice. My lived experience has been that there's a lot of ideas for us who are incarcerated about how to address and improve our circumstance, because it's a lived experience for us, and we want our lives to be more meaningful in how we live it, even behind prison walls. But for the most part, prisons doesn't come up. They're not going to come up with those ideas. And quite frankly, when they are confronted with an idea, their response to it is to sort of, as I said, cut away the meat and leave you with a lot of bone, and not the substance, not the flesh of what it is that you're trying to work on and get at. So for example, I started a trauma program when I was inside, and unfortunately COVID hit, but it took 8 months of like logistical going back and forth with the prison, who was like, well, the one time there's not a professional in there, then the program is shut down. I'm like, well, we're going to be rotating, and like, we're just trying to get approved to let professionals in the first place to work with trauma. You're talking about the conditions under which it's going to be shut down, and you want some like agreement on it, right? So my point there was just like, you know, I'm not really looking to have anything that the prison to adopt. I really want a culture, a movement that understands that we're not asking these people to do anything. We want to put these people in a situation where they have to say no, and they have to stand by their no. And we want them in public spaces explaining why they're going to say no to a program like trauma, to a program like education, and for the public to be able to take that common space and then push back on those administrators. Because right now there's no transparency, there's no accountability. And so we can come up with the best ideas. We can make all sorts of recommendations till we're blue in our face about what the system should change. Really what I want to talk about is how do we position ourselves such that we're forcing them to make decisions that actually work for us. And for me, the strategy is that from the inside, we come with ideas as well as from the outside, but we push them through the channels, and then we have a support out there so the institution understands that people are paying attention to the decisions that you're going to make and the reasons that you're saying yes or no or restraining these sorts of programs. And so my response to you is that I'm looking for that structure to exist so that we can be more effective with getting the things that we do need. But just talking about what we need is the thing that there's great minds out here already doing that, just willing to talk about what it is that we need. What we need is to really be thinking about how to get in what we need in a way that gets over the wall.
Skye, I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, man.
We have a question from Daniel. He says, when you said the movement is an open space for people who want to see the system change, were you referring to the BLM movement?
I was referring to no movement in particular, right? Because what we're talking about is human beings coming together to respond to a condition that should change. And the Black Lives Matter movement is a particular movement, and it's at the root of bringing people together. But we like to see a world where not only Black people assembling people gets us together, because, you know, we're 14% of the world, our population here in the United States. We need other movements to emerge from purely among white people, purely among people who aren't really directly impacted necessarily. So, but what I want people to understand, that any movement that's going to be in the name of changing the carceral system, therefore in the name of improving the lives of incarcerated, of members of minority communities, which are Black and brown communities, which the Black Lives Matter sprung out of, if you're going to do that work, you need to do that with an awareness of that this space that you create, that other people want to enter, is the space that actually and unto itself, the space itself, not just the ends that it seeks to achieve, but the space itself is a space where people can enter into, gain healing, and at least access to that healing and begin a process of healing, not necessarily just getting in there angrily with some demands to be made and self-righteous perspectives to espouse. Right? That whatever the movement is that people come into it aware that they're going to actually be doing the work of healing, because that's ultimately what this movement is all about, right? De-incarceration, abolition, it's all about people being able to live out their lives in a way that is respectable, that respects their humanity, that has opportunities on the table to be taken, and that they won't be restrained by systems that are oppressive and racist and supremacists. Right. And so, yeah, in Black Lives Matter is included in that, but it's not just about Black Lives Matter as the lens, as a gateway through, because, my experience is that a lot of people will do what they can do because they have the resources and they have the power. Not everybody's going to want to be a part of the Black Lives Matter movement because they perceive that they have a power and an influence and a voice that is readily set up for them. Right. And that's an unfortunate thing, because what African Americans and the Black Lives Matter has to offer is perspective that's necessary in getting us where we need to be. But I want to just address those who have whatever ideas about getting in and being a part of this movement, that the litmus that I want to carry and that we should be carrying, and that some people out there actually do, is a litmus of what's the quality of the work that you're doing, not just what you're saying you're doing it in the name of. Yeah.
So Skye, I wanted to join together. There are a couple of questions that I thought were related, having to do with maybe the kind of logistics or examples in your experience of forming those relationships of compassion across the Berlin Wall of inside and outside incarceration. So TL asked specifically, how do mental health providers, social workers, et cetera, start the process of getting into locked facilities to work alongside incarcerated individuals in road mapping, and what models for this are currently happening? And I think I'll join that also with the question. Daniel says, hello, Skye, I'm truly amazed by your perseverance and fight through all that you've been through. With that being said, what can we do as citizens to strengthen our relationship with incarcerated citizens? So I hear both those questions asking how, and I know you saw it from one side, but I know you have a lot of ideas about, from people on the outside, how they might go about reaching in.
Right. So first, like how would this be the setup for me to talk about technology and my mathematics, my joy of mathematics? But it is, right. And so as my senior project for mathematics was just envisioning this idea of artificial intelligence. I love the idea of language and computers, but more importantly, through my reading, I came to discover the way in which the algorithm is like really harming minority communities and poor people all over again in a way that I hadn't understood. But and as I studied further AI, this machine learning, it's really a matter of pattern recognition. And what we're most interested in, if you have a network of nodes and connecting lines, which are called edges, what we're really interested in, what are the main nodes in any network system? What's in that, because when you can know that, then you can know about what the system is, what nodes are fundamental to the system's functioning in the way that it is now. Right. And for when we want to regenerate that system, knowing those nodes are cool, because we know it enhances our capacity to do that. But when you want to deconstruct the system, it makes sense to me that it also is important to know what are the fundamental nodes that this criminal justice system has set up. And when you look at that nodes, those underlying generating factors that keep this carceral system alive, part of it is, this isolation. And so the question here is, how do we get involved inside, and how do we make those connections inside? And, we're not going to be able to do that through the structure of the system. The structure of the system is like, letter from letter from the jail in Birmingham, Alabama, when Martin Luther King was saying, I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to be deferred. I'm not going to wait. And it's like the use of the semicolon that's beautiful. It's like the institution is just going to make you wait and wait and wait and wait. And what we need is essentially a decentralization of things. Like that network shows that the more nodes in play, the more complex that system becomes and the more dynamic it becomes in response to any particular problem, or in this case, the flow of information, right? And so what I really want is all of us in our respective spaces, and part of my message is that all it takes for us is to care about a very fundamental thing, and that human beings need the support of other human beings. And within your respective corner where you are, you're here in Seattle, Washington, I'm in New York, and people are in California, and we're in Idaho, wherever we are, the question is the same question, right? It's what can I do for a person incarcerated, and what can I do? How can that impact this mass incarceration? How can that undermine the system in the way that it functions? And if you merely can go in and be a tutor for some time in prison, if you can merely go and be a part of a books behind bars, if you can merely be part of an education program where you volunteer your time, what you're doing is you're bolstering that network or system of decentralized efforts to shift what's going on with the system, right? Because when you know the nodes, that this system depends on these nodes being stable. Right. And what I envision is that destabilizing these nodes is part of what forces this system to shift. And when this system shifts, there's an opportunity, right? When the system is shifting to adapt for the ways in which you've made it uncomfortable to function, therein lies an opportunity. And so just you as a member of the public having curiosity about what's going on the inside and getting involved in however you can. It's not about Skye's ideas here and the particular ideas. They're not about particular ideas. They're about the generalization of ideas and you getting involved and wherever you can, however you can. And it's great for me to recognize and give testimony to wherever there's a prison, there's a small community of people who actually are finding their way inside. And so you may just have to do a little bit of homework. And please bring your friends, bring other people who care. Right? And have an imagination once you have some of that experience, or when you're talking with those people, to imagine something new. Because all we have to do is create the circumstances where the prison needs to shift, because it can't do some fundamental harms that it's been doing anymore, because there's too many people inside caring about the people, there's too many people outside caring about the people inside, and all eyes are on us. That's a great day, because the prison is not used to having eyes on it and having the input and influence and perspective of other people outside and having plans for its agenda, right? A trauma program is plans for the prison's agenda. A GED tutoring program is plans for the prison's agenda, right? Make plans for their agenda so there's less space for their agenda.
Thank you. Laura asks, for people that are interested in getting involved with mass incarceration abolition, do you have organizations that you would recommend?
Where's Laura at? In New York? Laura, I don't know where you're at. You could be a part of an international organization. The question is how can you help from the United States in a different location? You could, international is the wrong example. You can be in New York, but if you sign up for an organization in California, how could you be of help outside of your money or maybe your ideas? In the COVID world, you can be on Zoom right now and sharing those ideas. So I encourage all of us to do a little homework. Fortunately, again, it's not hard to find groups of people who have a self-assembled. Like the key word here is that, I'm having a message about my own personal experience, but part of that message is really to let you know, all of you on this call, that you have a great mind. There are ideas. And if you don't, a little Google search, Google better than I do. I just got out here and Google's not a priority in my life, actually, quite frankly, just yet. I haven't really used it as a device. I'm trying to get other fundamental things in my life squared away. And, quite frankly, most of my life has been inside of a prison. So I'm not really in a position to tell you or anyone else on this call where to go unless it's in my direct network. Really what I want to say instead is simply to say that just like me, you didn't have to be plugged into an existing network to come up with something. Now, my situation was much more dire and more extreme, and it was my life that I was fighting for in particular. But it still remains, my friend, that there's a small community local, make some local inquiry. And if you're willing, something as benign, is not benign actually, but seemingly benign as a study group inside prison, find a way to start it up. You don't have to necessarily be a part of a whole organization, right? Like that's the other thing, is that part of my message today was that I want us to be able to look at what existing organizations are doing, and then for us to ask the questions, right? Are the people in that organization involved really also promoting the healing and the wellness of the people involved? Is there a message that's inviting to other people to get involved? Like, I don't know these organizations intimately in that way, but I know their ends, and I want to talk to what those ends are. But I think something as benign as just going in and spending time into getting to know the lives of incarcerated people is something that actually can make a difference, because it makes a difference at the level of what I see as being the cornerstone of this system, which is the dehumanization of people. And so if you can just know what a person's life is like, and important for me, it was like when I was inside, I wasn't a part of the violent culture, and for that reason, I was invisible in many respects. And if it weren't for people from the public who responded to my letter writing campaigns, or who were already coming in with existing programs, therefore then they're willing to have a conversation with me about another program, and then do the work with me, I would have remained invisible. I would have not had anything to contribute, that was actually realized. And so it was just like, yo, man, go in, be a part of it, learn the landscape, and find a way to do the work from the inside, man. Crack that little crevice, break it open. That's it.
I'm going to bring a question from one of my students. Genesis Paga says, as a young adult who has not experienced inequality, injustice, or discriminational events of this world, do you think people like me would still be able to have a positive influence or positive impact on empowering movements in today's society?
Yeah, that's great. I have some friends. I'm from East Greenbush. It's a small suburb outside of Albany. I wasn't raised in an urban space. And, my experience of just being African-American, there's just so much diversity in Black community. It's beautiful, it's brilliant, and it ranges. It's not a monolith. We're not all having the same experience. Our beauty is vast. And, I have friends though, that the same is true for them. And so my response to them, man, is like, I should also say that I'm an adopted child and my parents are Caucasian. So like, I really want to say that, what you certainly have a contribution to make, right? Because make no mistake, a lot of what's happening in these minority communities, lack of education opportunity, poverty, mass incarceration, a lot of these things are done in the name of white privilege, right? And, in the last few years, we've been looking at and calling out white supremacy. We've been signaling that, what's going on in criminal justice circles has been a matter of racism and a matter of bigotry and supremacy. And, I think the biggest thing you can do with immediacy is not be a denier, right? Not being someone who makes an excuse and is willing to examine their own life, their own privilege, and follow the trail from the things that you have privilege on and see where it leads you. And to be honest and be willing to look at it when you get there, when you arrive, to see how your privileges have been, what they've been derived from, that you yourself are willing to look at it candidly and be in conversation with members of minorities communities who are suffering under the brunt of that. And you also discover that there's a lot of breadth in our communities, right? We're not just a suffering community, or just angry and disgruntled and frustrated. That's part of the propaganda too, right? You can come to us and say, hey man, I discovered that this is a thing that I have and I don't share your experience. And then we can help you actually see how your experience is not so foreign from us, less in this perspective it is, but there's other parts of our human experience. That's why this is about being human, right? There's parts of our human experience where there's just very little divide, right? And the other thing is just like, in terms of like, sometimes we think too, there's not enough range in our vision and our view about our history, about who we are as a people, right? When you think of the Darwinian theory of natural selection and human evolution, populations evolve, right? And as a species, we've evolved over hundreds of millions of years. We have no fathom of what it means 1,000, hundreds of thousands of years, or 1 million years. What is that even like, right? And so the idea is like, we may not see really clearly that there's so much more that's real and connecting us than some of these small, petty, political, privilege-based things that we think separates us. Like, we don't have long enough of a view about what it means to even be human if we're really going to be tripping up on the fact that your color is different from mine, or some of the privileges that you've received. In fact, they're real. Those privileges are real. But the question is, are they enduring in a human way, right? Do they really translate as something, that we can't transcend when we just recognize our basic fundamental humanity and have compassion for one another? So like, the other things that you can do is, again, part of this conversation is just, live out of compassion, create space, be willing to look at the hard and difficult things. And when you're in contact with people who are members of the minority community, who are only angry, who are only frustrated, and they're coming at you with energy that's angry, just be mindful that that's a part that's pent up, but that, in some circles, don't move yourself, you don't have to take the brunt of someone's unfocused and mischanneled energy. But sometimes it serves a lot to just recognize that you understand where that's coming from, and that you're still here. You're not running away. You're not all scared of us. You understand that the history and the long-standing injustices have produced this reaction initially, instinctually, and that beyond that initial reaction, there's something that's more important, and that you're on board for that work. That's what you can do. Thanks.
Stephanie asked or says, you talked about past trauma. So many cultural pressures and the traumatic experiences of our parents and ancestors impact our own understanding of trauma and how we experience and recognize our own feelings. Are there ways you think we can be more aware of our traumas and those in our communities, and scale that up to boost our national cognizance of the role of trauma in the criminalization of trauma, especially non-white youth in the incarceration pipeline?
Okay. Well, let me start with the end of that, the non-white youth in the incarceration pipeline. It's interesting that when you think of, when you I got a whole head full of Hollywood. If you're American, you got a whole head of Hollywood slave movies, and where the African-American woman is the nanny for, the slave holders' children. And I have an image of the church, the Black church being a place where, we were restrained and restricted to, but any white person could walk in and have care, right? And, if we're talking about legacy here, we're talking about being an oppressed people who also create enough space for the rest of the human family, while the rest of the human family may not have space for us, right? That's a legacy. That's a beautiful part of our legacy. That's a beautiful part of who I am, coming out of my experience, and understand that I'm not just here to advocate for other Black people. I'm here to advocate for the whole human family, because I embody that whole human family, right? That, as it goes back to Africa, our ancestors go back a long, long way. My memory of me is a long-term memory, and it goes back from ancient civilization, right? So there's no tripping in it on me. A little white boy in the pipeline, a little white girl, child in the pipeline of this carceral system, they deserve saving too, just like my people do, right? And so the idea here is that how can we become more expansive is also, more importantly, again, this conversation about leading the way for healing, right? And so us having conversations with ourselves about the trauma that we're experiencing in our own communities, right? I said that I'm a part of I'm a part of Galaxy Gives. I'm on the board. We're funders, we're donors. We decide who to give money to as individual activists developing to their organizations, longstanding, budding, or again, longstanding. And I was just recently, we interviewed a young man. He's part of our Galaxy Leaders program, and we're committed to giving him resources. His name is James. He's out in Chicago. And James says to me, bro, I want to remind you that there's also work that we need to do inside Chicago among ourselves, right? That there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of Black on Black crime, right? And while we decry what's going on with Black people in law enforcement, we also, this is a problem for ourselves. It's not a public problem. It's not something that we're going to air out with the media and the news and let them frame this conversation, right? You know, stand outside. We can take care of this on our own, right? But it's something that we need to start doing that around. And out of that becomes a conversation that is about our trauma, right? And so my point here is that's just one example, but my point here is that, yes, sister, like us being able to take our own trauma in hand, understand it, see it, make moves on addressing it, collect other people who want to be a part of that, we also become, again, pioneers on how to care for the whole human family around this issue. And so I just encourage us to continue to champion what it means to be a person who suffered from trauma and the needs and the importance of getting help and supporting those who want to receive help and pointing people in the right directions and being a part of that conversation around the wellness. Because, right, being traumatized, getting help for your trauma also requires us to have a practice of wellness. And this is what, for me, makes it obvious that if there's going to be a movement about decarceration and valuing the lives of people on the inside, then that's really a movement about healing trauma. Right? Because that's the product of mass incarceration. If anybody didn't know, now you know, and you should know this, right? The product of mass incarceration is trauma. You know, and if you're just going to fight a system that's generating trauma and create your own trauma or ignore your own trauma, then what? What's up? You know what I mean? And so, yeah, trauma is central to this conversation because trauma is at the roots of what we need to address in order to heal. And it's not a thing that we have perfected, but it's a thing that, just like mass incarceration, ending it is a conversation that we're having more and more. And so we should put this front and center. And I also want to give a plug to the fact that this is a woman's conversation, right? These ideas about reparations, these ideas about restorative justice, these ideas about trauma, women are leading the conversation around these issues. And so we also need to turn our heads in an about face, get on one knee, man, and understand the wisdom of that woman and that she has a plan and she has an idea that can take us to where we need to go. Just want to say that too.
Well, I wish we had hours more to continue the conversation, but it's 11:30, so we should probably wrap up. Thank you, Skye, so much for all that you brought to our campus. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful questions that you've brought to Skye. Thank you to the Unity Week Committee for making this happen, and Highline College.